This week on Africa Update, the Nigeria general elections have come and gone, but not without surprises, hitches and glitches. What are the effects of the elections on the African continent? Also on the program, the power of slam poetry in aiding young Senegalese express themselves. And on Roundup Africa, we'll also highlight some of the major stories from across the continent. This is Africa Update on Trust TV, reaching you from Abuja, the nation's capital. I am Ibrahim Yusuf. Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us on Africa Update. We begin with the Nigeria general elections, which have come and gone, but not without some surprises, hitches and glitches. However, the effects of the elections go beyond the borders of the country and resonate throughout the African continent. Not only because Nigeria has the largest population on the continent or its seeming economic prowess, but because it is the first of 6 general elections taking place on the continent this year, and therefore could have some measure of influence in the way other elections go across Africa. Chiamaka Nwafo looks at the impact the Nigerian elections will have on elections in other democracies on the continent in this report.
Nigeria has the biggest democracy and is the largest oil producer and has the largest economy on the continent with a population of over 200 million people. But it doesn't stop there. The country's creative class has influence and reach that commands international attention. There are parallels that can be drawn between Nigeria's challenges and those experienced by other African democracies, where regular elections are not delivering the kind of leadership, accountability and service delivery that citizens wish to see. Although there are 11 elections taking place in 2023, there are 6 general elections taking place this year. Right after the Nigerian elections comes the Sierra Leone general elections in June, while the polls in Zimbabwe will be conducted in July. In August, the Gabonese electorate will go to the polls, while the vote in Liberia will be held in October. The Democratic Republic of the Congo will end the election cycle on the 20th of December. The conduct of elections in Nigeria will impact on elections in these countries, and a successful conduct of the vote means that there will not be a negative current running through the other countries. More importantly, the fact that there has been no unconstitutional change of government in Nigeria will mean the negative feature will not cascade down to other countries.
Now, that report was put together by Chiamaka Nwafo. Now, what are the effects of the Nigerian general elections on the African continent? Joining us to discuss this is Fidelis Mba, a renowned journalist who has covered quite a number of African countries. Hello and welcome to Africa Update.
Thank you, Ibrahim, for having me.
All right. Now, you have covered elections in Nigeria and, of course, in other African countries as well. Now, with the just concluded Nigerian general elections, how would you rate the conduct of this election compared to others that you have witnessed?
Well, no election is actually perfect in terms of how it's organized. And after every election, like in Nigeria, we have a history of the opposition or those who lost out actually challenging the outcome. No matter how, I don't think there's been any, especially general election, especially at the presidency, that is held without people coming out to, pick out holes in the conduct of those elections. And then the 2023 election is not any different because there've been reported cases of infractions here and there, non-compliance with electoral laws, delays in the conduct of elections, people saying they were disenfranchised, security people interfering in some cases in the conduct of the elections, and general issues. And I mean, there are several cases. In fact, someone was actually telling me that the reported number of cases that before the tribunals will have to look at is actually unprecedented given recent, previous years. So all eyes will be on the Nigerian judiciary in terms of like trying to find out what exactly happened, trying to allow the opposition to air their views, their lawyers trying to justify where, especially cases of the two leading presidential candidates, that's talking about Atiku Abubakar and Peter Obi, who are challenging the outcome and who are saying that they should, like in case of Peter Obi, where he's saying he should be declared president or that the elections should be annulled. And then also the president-elect, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, insisting that he won fair and square. So it will be a case for the judiciary to actually determine, and all eyes will be on the judiciary. But again, you look at the history of the judiciary in previous years, we've never really had any landmark election ruling at the top, especially that's talking about the presidency. We've never had a case of the presidential election being overturned. So people are saying, is this going to be the first time? We've had that in some other countries, like we've had that previously in Malawi, I think Zambia, and Kenya, where the presidential elections were overturned due to also similar cases that the Nigerian opposition politicians are talking about. So for us here in Nigeria, the focus is on us. Apart from Nigerians, the international community is watching with keen interest, and also given that we are considered the big players, we're considered the big brothers of Africa, especially for countries like Liberia and Sierra Leone, where we've played very key roles over the years in terms of restoring peace, in terms of also supporting their democracy. So for them they will be having their elections this year. So all eyes will be on, even for them, they'll be following keenly to see what happens at the end of this judicial process.
All right. Well, talking about the outcome of the elections, Nigeria, with the large number of population that it has, and of course the role it plays in the African continent, how is the outcome likely to affect other African countries, both being neighboring countries and countries elsewhere across the continent?
Given our role in ECOWAS, that's the Economic Community of West African States, where, like I mentioned earlier, we are the big brothers. ECOWAS would always go to monitor elections and would give verdicts, more like the verdict about the conduct. And also we've played a big role over the years, also in conjunction with ECOWAS, in condemning countries where there've been coups, where there've been crises, where like in Mali, where they've been like in and out of military rule. We've always been very outspoken in terms of like condemning the lack of democracy and the lack of transparency in the conduct of the elections. So these other countries would also be watching to see, are we going to practice what we've preached over the years? So how the election, especially the election tribunals, the appeal court, would handle the outcome of this election, that's the outcome of the petitions after these elections, will be key in terms of us also continuing to play similar roles in terms of more like guiding them, supporting them, and also being very vocal about the conduct, their conduct, and also their democracy going forward.
All right, now let's talk about the conduct of the election itself. Lots of things that actually came after the conduct of the election concerning the outcome or because of how the election was perceived, how it was conducted. Now, were there things that actually the Independent National Electoral Commission, were there things that they got right that other African countries can be able to imbibe and probably build upon to ensure free and fair elections across the continent?
Well, as much as many people have voiced their concerns, especially those in the opposition, the civil society, ordinary Nigerians, about what they think, the things they feel were wrong with the election. But one thing I think I want to point out is the use of the beavers, in the conduct of elections. Yeah, at the presidential election level, it wasn't really deployed as it should. Also, the use of IRF to send out results in quick time, wasn't perfect. But in terms of like maybe the state governorship, the gubernatorial elections, the parliamentary elections, that's at the state level, even at the presidential, at the national level, the way they deployed the electronic gadgets actually worked more like to counter some of the narratives we've had over the years. We've seen states where we had they churned out crazy numbers that people couldn't really even relate with. But again, there was nothing really to counter those numbers. but with accreditation using BVAS and IRF to send out these results rather, it actually showed that people, there were less rigging in terms of like, especially at the local level, where results tend to more like count, but where I think most of the people who are petitioning the Independent National Electoral Commission is, especially in the compilation of the results. But in terms of like quick accreditation, also ensuring that things were done in orderly manner. I went to my village, to vote, and in no time, I think I spent less than 5 minutes. I was accredited, I was voted, unlike, and I voted, unlike previous years where you stand in the queue, you get accredited, after sweating under the sun, you stand by the side, you wait for a long time before going to cast your ballot. So I think it's something that other African countries should think, more like consider deploying similar IT tools to be able to conduct the elections. With that, it's easier to even challenge election results. That's also able for you are able to also weed out like ghost voters or those who are not qualified to vote during elections, and also to ensure there's some seeming level of transparency in the process, because with the electronic gadgets being deployed, even if you're going to file a petition, there are enough evidence for you, because this can either be collated via the iCloud, or you can also physically verify these machines, more like previous years where it had to do with word of mouth in terms of, more like witnesses. And when the person is not there, it's very difficult to prove your case.
All right. Now let's talk about the aftermath of the elections. Recently, the Nigerian Secret Police raised an alarm that there were some people calling for an unconstitutional means of actually of changing power in the Nigerian society. How would that affect the state of Nigerian democracy going forward if that were to happen?
Well, the average Nigerian, also those even in the political actors, they've actually come to say that, look, they are not in support of any planned interim national government, because they feel it's not constitutional. We've had an election. Either we are accepting the outcome, or maybe they are calling for a rerun or outright cancellation. But the thing is, before even the DSS came out with their statement, this talk about interim government had been there. It was, it's been in the rumor mill for a long time. Even before the elections were conducted, I remember a very prominent lawyer in the Southwest had called a press conference some months before the elections, saying that with what's happening, with all the confusion around the electoral process, that it wouldn't be a bad idea to come up with an interim government. He was more like suggesting. So, yeah, recently we've heard that people are advocating for that. But then, this is not established. For me, I feel like what the DSS were saying, because they didn't come up with any concrete or verifiable information, especially for us journalists, I feel like, for me, I still consider it a rumor, because if these things are true, name the culprits, apprehend them, and then prosecute them. This is a democracy, because going to interim government might actually not augur well in terms of the electoral process. And I don't think there's any provision for that at the moment. I don't know, maybe that might happen in the future, but at the moment, there's no provision. So, yes, it's good that they've come out to warn politicians, but again, the tone for me was what I didn't quite agree with, because when I saw the statement sounded more like, almost more like an opposition statement, because the use of the words were so harsh. I feel like it should have been, you can still make your point without sounding, that way. So, but by and large, it's been said that, okay, some people are behind the call or plotting for that. But I feel that the security agencies will deal decisively with that.
All right, now let's talk about the economy. The effects of the elections or the election results or whatever change of power comes within Nigeria definitely will resonate with Nigeria's trade partners. With the current trajectory right now, with things being what they are, with the current president-elect and what you have seen so far, do you see any of these economic ties changing with the new administration?
Well, the president-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu has come out to say that even during his campaign, he was saying that he's going to continue on the legacies of President Muhammadu Buhari. So, which actually suggests that he's going to toe the same line in terms of our economic interests, in terms of our diplomatic interests. So, I don't really see anything changing. Yeah, he might be, especially he's coming from the private sector. He's worked over the years, apart from being a politician. So, his ideas, or in terms of like approach, might be slightly different, but I don't see him totally going against the current diplomatic and economic ties that the country enjoys with some countries across the world.
Okay, so we're talking about that now, saying that maybe most likely there might not be much of a shift when it comes to economic policies and the rest of it. There are actually some domestic policies that both individuals seem to differ on those. So a lot of people are looking at the situation whereby if they can differ on those, most likely they might differ on those that actually affect other African countries as well.
Well, to some extent, it might not work that way, because for economic and diplomatic relationships with other countries or policies, this is something that beyond you just being the president, you have a think tank, you have technocrats who sit with you and review the policies that have been put in place. So for the domestic policies, you can easily wake up and just maybe make a pronouncement. For instance, he can wake up and say, okay, you know what, we're enjoying some form of relief in terms of, especially with the petroleum sector. He might just wake up and say, okay, you know what, I don't want any form of relief in the petroleum sector. I want the private sector to be able to drive this. We've had a very difficult problem trying to, especially with the economic policies as regards to the petroleum sector, to ensure the availability of oil, especially for fuel, gas, and kerosene for people to use. He might just come and say, you know what, whatever policies have been put in place, I don't want it overnight. But when it comes to foreign policies, he has to sit down with his team. He has to sit down with our representatives and also look at it holistically. Not just, it's not something you just wake up and make an announcement. It's not like a presidential fiat that you just maybe issue a directive and then stop it. So it's something that you also have to consult the countries concerned to explain to them why you're taking certain actions. So it might not be totally, more like turning. It might change the local policy, but changing the foreign policies might take a while, because you will also have to consult widely to ensure that it doesn't backfire, because there are some policies that if you put in place, it might work against the interests of the country, both politically, economically, and otherwise.
All right. Well, earlier when we were talking about the conduct of the elections, we touched on ECOWAS and the member states, and of course the role that they can be able to play in ensuring that. But on a more wider level now, the African Union, is there any role that it can play to ensure peaceful democratic changes within the African continent on a larger scale?
Well, I'm afraid to tell you that for the African Union, I don't think, as much as they've always issued statements, sent the observers, but they've not been as firm as one would have expected a regional bloc to be. So over the years, even when there are coups in countries or there are political crises, they will merely just issue statements, maybe send a few diplomats to go and dialogue with them. It's in only very few cases where they come really hard. So I feel like the African Union should be able to be firmer than they've been over the years, especially with across country, not just because you take on smaller countries and then when it comes to the giants of the continent, you're a bit soft. So I feel like African Union should be more firm. They should be also more seen to be practicing what they preach, because then you have, leaders of the African Union who are also guilty of some of the things some of the countries are committing, or where there have been infractions in certain countries. We have leaders who have gone above their limits, their tenure limit over time. So when you have such leaders at the helm of African Union, what are you going to preach to other countries that the leaders are also trying to toe the same line? So I feel like it's a case of there's more like an introspection among the leaders of the African Union, and so that they'll be firmer, they'll be more transparent, And also, they'll be more accountable to people on the continent.
All right, well, accountability to people on the continent, that is what we look forward to. Fidelis Mbah, thank you very much for coming on Africa Update today and, of course, giving us all those insights concerning the Nigerian general election and, of course, its effects on the African continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, this is still Africa Update on Trust TV. When we return, the power of slam poetry in aiding young Senegalese express themselves. Join us again.
Now, as part of efforts to support Africa's goal of strengthening...
Now, looking at the activity chart, as you can see right here, a total volume of 130.
Created a Boko Haram crisis that at that time was restricted to Yobe.
How secure are they? You can see security men with blood.
This is the road leading up to the...
Already, if you look at England squad, you are looking at EPL, you are looking at their names. You are not looking at...
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us on Africa Update on Trust TV. Now, slam poetry is making its mark on urban culture in Senegal and offering young people a way to voice their opinions about their lives and society. Now, Seydina Abba Gueye has this report from Senegal, narrated by Salem Solomon.
Through these words, this young slammer who goes by the name Madji takes aim at what she says are the evils that plague Senegalese society. A lover of rhythms, she says she was seduced by slam, although she prefers rap, which is more popular in the streets of Dakar.
Le slam parce que c'est plus simple.
Slam is simpler, and it's an art that adapts to many things and many environments. I have to admit, I didn't have the flow to rap. I didn't have other options, and I wanted to really share my writing and my feelings.
Easy but engaging, since its creation, slam has been one of the ways minorities and the oppressed can express themselves.
The spoken word a été déjà l'arme.
In the United States, for example, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X used verse to express their frustration. So it developed over time. Slam is not for choosing the best poet, but it's just to awaken the community spirit.
Slam, as an art form, is now gaining popularity with young people here in Senegal. Hip-hop experts say the art form appeals to young people.
Bon, parce qu'il y a pas beaucoup de slameurs au Sénégal.
There are not many slammers in Senegal. It is something that has been created for a very long time, which has been part of hip-hop for a very long time. But there are not many slammers. Now it's much more visible because it's easy to get a message across through slam. The style is very calm musically. We put forward the message that allows the artist to convey their message as well.
With detailed texts, multifaceted verses, and an often soothing rhythm, artists who practice slam are using verse to paint a picture about their life in Senegal. For Seydina Abba Gueye in Dakar, Salem Solomon, VOA News.
All right, there you have it. And now let's go for stories happening on the African continent. It's time for Roundup Africa.
That toll from Cyclone Freddy, which dissipated in mid-March after massive flooding and landslides in southern Africa, could exceed 1,200 in Malawi as hopes dwindle of finding survivors, police and authorities have said on Thursday. The cyclone killed at least 676 people in Malawi, the epicenter of the disaster, And the country's disaster management department says that chances of finding the 538 missing more than 2 weeks after the disaster have become painfully slim. Search operations with sniffer dogs are continuing in some places. It's heard Charles Kalemba said on Wednesday, but no longer in hard-hit Blantyre, as a team on the ground has informed us that they have done their best. Formed in early February off Australia, the cyclone, with exceptional longevity, has made an unprecedented crossing of over 8,000 kilometers from east to west in the Indian Ocean. It followed a looping path rarely recorded by meteorologists, hitting Madagascar and Mozambique for the first time at the end of February and then again in March for these two countries and Malawi. According to the United Nations, in addition to the heavy toll in Malawi, Freddy also killed 165 people in Mozambique and another 17 in Madagascar. Pirates have abandoned a Danish-owned ship hijacked in the Gulf of Guinea last week, but have taken some crew members with them while others have been brought to safety. Owners of the vessels have disclosed. The Liberian-flagged oil and chemicals tanker Munjasa Reformer was boarded on Saturday by 5 armed people, 225 kilometers west of the Republic of Congo's port, Pointe-Noire. Its owner, Munjasa, said at the time 16 crew members were on board. The Reformer subsequently went missing but was later located by the French Navy off Sao Tome and Principe. The rescued crew members are all in good health and no damage was reported to the ship and its cargo. The Gulf of Guinea, described by the International Maritime Bureau as one of the world's most dangerous shipping routes, covers 11,000 square kilometers and stretches from Angola to Senegal. Since 2021, piracy cases have been on the decline due to cooperation among countries in the region and deployments of foreign naval ships, according to the United Nations Security Council. In November 2021, a Danish naval patrol killed 4 pirates in an exchange of fire just outside Nigeria's territorial waters. And in South Africa, the government workers in the country are to receive a pay rise, bringing to an end months of negotiations and industrial action. The union, representing almost 250,000 public servants, the Public Service Association, PSA, has accepted the government's offer of 7.5%. The pay hike will be implemented from the 1st of April. The PSA was initially pushing for a 10% pay increase at a time the economy is shrinking. A section of public servants went to strike early March after wage talks with the government failed. And that's it on Roundup Africa.
And this is how we wrap up Africa Update on Trust TV for this week. For this and other programs, you can catch up on all our social media platforms. I am Ibrahim Yusuf. Thanks for watching.